Hey, so this is the recorded version of the live that I tried to do, but sadly, internet said no. So we're going for this for an option. Obviously, you can ask your questions and I will respond to them. I'm really sorry that it has failed, and I will look at doing it from right next to the internet modem next week, so we don't have this problem. Okay, so tonight we're talking about parallel parenting and managing conflict. So parallel parenting is the best solution to higher conflict separation than trying to co-parent. Co-parenting itself implies cooperation, working together, negotiation, equality. We know narcissists do not see anyone as equal to them, so they are not going to co-parent. It's just impossible. Added to that, under a normal family separation, all that happens is the relationship between you and the parent comes apart. The relationship between you and the children stays intact, and actually, as a unit, you still exist. There's two parents and one child rather than all in one, but you still all exist and still all have those interactions. That's a normal separated parenting structure. With narcissists, of course, they can't possibly do that, and so they don't just sever that relationship between you two. You are out, and it's them and the child, and then you over there somewhere, non-existent to them. And so you can't co-parent with someone who has that attitude. And like I say, parallel parenting is the best that there is. It's not foolproof, but it is the best, because it reduces the opportunity for them to bring conflict into the relationship. So essentially it is that disengagement between you two. You don't have contact, or you have limited contact about the child and nothing else. And literally just the real important stuff. Contact is very business-like. It is, remember all the stuff we did on communication, that fits perfectly into the parallel parenting plan, because it's about not engaging with conflict and creating very little wiggle room, because that's what we want. We want them to not have the room to be able to flare up and drag you into drama, which is what they love to do, because they love drama. That's who they are. They love having any attention to them is good, even if it's bad. They will feel buzzing after the end of an argument because they've had all that attention. For normal people, we hate that. It's draining and we feel tired and emotionally exhausted, but not them. And so parallel parenting reduces the opportunity for that. So essentially, you parent in your own homes separately. You don't need to know the ins and outs of what they're doing. Very little room for conversation. My advice as well is to only use one method of communicating. So it might be that you have a dedicated email just for them, so that you know when you go into that inbox, you know it's going to be from them. Or it might be that you have a phone that is just for them. So one of those really cheap, crappy little phones, dedicated SIM card, so that they can, you know, when that goes off, it's them and you've got a choice, or you can get yourself in the right frame of mind before you look at it. The other option is co-parenting apps. I recommend Our Family Wizard and I think it's Two Houses. The there is a cost to them, but they do vary, and they vary in what they offer as well. So do have a Google of them and see what they are, but they're all available on smartphones. And it's just another way of putting your boundary in place, because they will always try and get to you because they feel that they can use your energy. And so you need to put as many boundaries in place as possible, and limiting the avenues for communication and having very strict one method is a good way of doing that. Like I said, they are always going to try, but then it's about how you manage that, which we talked about last time. So conflict in itself, evidence has shown that it's not necessarily the conflict or a child witnessing conflict that causes the most damage. It's their exposure to it. So it's knowing that it's happening. You know yourself when you walk into a room and there's conflict that's gone on or is bubbling. No one needs to say anything. You just feel it. And that's what they're saying that children pick up on. Children are very highly tuned, so they will pick up on the different moods and the different energies. And if you understand that narcissistic children are particularly attuned to the emotions of others because they've been conditioned to be the caretaker of the narcissist's emotions. So they know the slightest change in a mood, and so they will really pick up on conflict. So parallel parenting and reducing the opportunity for them to be exposed to that is really beneficial to them and to you, obviously. So babies as young as 6 months, they actually have a physiological response to being exposed to conflict. They get their heartbeat will race, and that's just really sad, isn't it? That a child who doesn't understand words can pick up, but it shows what I was just saying is how attuned children are to the energy around them. That babies who do not understand noise, do not understand what loud voices mean, or the words that are being said, or the intonation of what is being said, they still know it doesn't feel right, and their body has a natural response to that. And if ever there was a starker sort of wake-up call than that, I mean, I don't know what it is, because that in itself is pretty big stuff. Infants and children up to 5 show signs of distress by crying, acting out, freezing. So literally just, they don't know how to react to it, so they just go into shock, and they might withdraw, or they might even try and intervene. And that, again, that might not be physically, it might be standing up, which again, the narcissist will try and triangulate them. So it might be that they get in that sense, but it will not make them feel good. And they're children. They don't really understand what's going on in terms of the reasons for that conflict, and yet they're being asked to take part, or they're feeling like they have to take part when they don't understand something. And as an adult, if you were suddenly said, right, you need to pick a side, and you had no idea what they were even arguing about, how stressful would that be? It's a horrible place for a child to be put in. And you know this, I know I'm teaching you to suck eggs, you're aware of that, but it's important that we revisit and we are constantly aware of the impact that this is having on the children, because that has to be at the forefront for us as parents, that we know what's happening to them. So children between 6 and 17 years of age show emotional and behavioural distress when they're exposed to conflict, and this can be increased anxiety, depression, aggression, hostility, antisocial and criminal behaviour, as well as struggling with their schoolwork. Understandably, there's so much going on around them. It's affecting the hormones in their body. There'll be lots of cortisol, lots of adrenaline, and we know that these are the precursors for developing PTSD. So as parents, if we can manage that as much as possible, it really helps with that, reducing that long-term development, because we know that conflict causes interruptions to child development, and if we can manage that, if we can reduce that for them, then their longer term outcomes are much more improved, and we're preventing the likelihood of them having mental health problems and having PTSD, for example. I might sneeze in a second. So it is how parents manage that conflict that can determine how a child adjusts. So children need to see a certain amount of conflict, because if they don't see it, then they don't know how to repair it. And there's so much research. Winnicott did a lot of work on how important it is that caregiver and child have those ruptures in the relationship, because it's the coming back together that brings the real strength of their relationship. And so it's okay for children to witness some conflict. Don't be afraid of not voicing your opinion because it might create conflict. Just, it's about how it is managed. Now, obviously we know with a narcissist, they will just push and push and push because they don't have that same level of understanding and empathy for the children. So all they're bothered about is winning the argument. And so it's about how you resolve and manage conflict in front of them. So management styles such as violence, aggression, non-verbal or the silent treatment can result in maladaptive responses in children, which leads to increased distress and an increased risk for those psychological problems that I just spoke about. However, constructive conflict resolution can be massively help with low risk of distress, but an increased potential in their social competence and general well-being in children, because, you know, they're going to go to school and they're going to see people fall out. They're going to fall out with their own friends. They need to know how to manage conflict. This is not about them not seeing and not feeling and not witnessing conflict, because that's unrealistic for life, and that is creating a rescuer relationship where if you try and wrap them up in cotton wool, you need them to experience conflict in order to know how to handle it. But it's important that you are modelling effective conflict resolution in order for your child to know how to do that. So I'm going to look at that. So just unresolved conflict is the worst for a child. Partially resolved is better, but fully resolved is the best. So, how do you manage conflict with the ex? Well, remembering what we spoke about last week about communication and ego states, for you it's about staying in your adult ego state, because when you're in that state you are less likely to get drawn into the argument. So they might throw stuff at you, but you can stay calm and you can just stay out of it. So they're basically just having an argument with themselves at that point, and you're not feeling it. And that's the most important thing, is you're not feeling drawn into the conflict. So staying in that adult ego state is really, really important. The next one is be aware of your emotions and energy. If you're having a conversation with them and you start to feel your blood boil, be aware that that's going to have an impact on your whole energy around you. You might come off the call and be angry, or just, you know, have that general huffy sort of thing going on that we all get when we've had a bad conversation or something's annoyed us. But it's being aware of that if your children are around. So becoming more conscious of your own emotions and your own feelings and how you're carrying yourself. Like I use the word energy a lot, because for me it's the best way to describe it, because it is that, what is your overall energy at the moment, and trying to keep it upbeat. You know, you can't do that all the time, but try and keep that status quo as much as possible. But when you do go and get mardy or get angry or have those negative outbursts, that's okay. It's how do you bring yourself back into that status quo, and how do you get back into your equilibrium? That's the most important bit, is getting yourself back into it, not the explosion or the coming out of it. It's the coming back into it. So being aware of, one, when you are out of it, and two, how do you get back into it. And like I said, just, you know when they're gunning for a fight, in their language, whether you are doing it through email or text, when they're just looking to start a fight. Just don't bother. Don't bother responding, because you don't want that. So just, like I say, just getting more attuned with your own emotions, your own feelings and your intuition, so that when you sense that's all they're after, just don't play. So there's going to be conflict in the family, whatever your family structure is. It might be that you're with someone else, or it could be just your parents or siblings. There will be times, or even friends, there will be times when there is conflict, because like I say, that's human relationships. We don't agree on everything, and we find a way to express it, and sometimes that bumps people up the wrong way. That is normal part of relationships, and that's not a problem. The conflict is not the problem, it's how we resolve it. So how do you resolve it within the family? Well, the first thing is find a way to resolve it. Be aware that you are always looking for resolution. It's not about winning. I think this is really important for familial arguments, that it's not about winning, it's that bigger picture. Sometimes it's okay to say, I hear what you're saying, I have a different point of view, but that's okay. It doesn't change what I feel about you. I'm sure we can find a way to agree to disagree. And that is a resolution. It's not we're both on the same page and we're both in agreement, but it's we've resolved the fact that there's no we're not going to have conflict. We're not going to fall out about this. So it's not about winning. It's about the relationship. Always make sure it comes back to the maintaining of the relationship and the love that exists within that relationship. That's way more important, because your children are going to see that. Your children are going to see how you handle conflict, and they're going to learn from that. So make sure that you've got it sussed how to handle conflict. Have family rules for managing conflict between adults, and then have them for managing conflict between children. So if you've got siblings, for example, there might be rules that you put in place on how you're going to manage that. There might be, between partners, rules on how you're going to manage the conflict. They might be the same, but just be aware that there might be differences as well. But make sure that everyone adheres to those rules, that you won't name call, that you won't go to bed in a huff. You'll always try and resolve it. You will always, like I say, find a way to agree to disagree. So some pointers for you is agree to negotiate. Very rarely should you go in with a full-on hard stance of, I'm right, there's only one way to do this, and it's my way. When you're in a relationship, always be open to what the other person has to say, and look for opportunities to negotiate. Negotiation does not mean lying back and letting them walk all over you. It means give and take. So always be open to that. Both parties, all parties. Check your mindset. Like I said, don't start an argument because you fell out with someone else. It happens, but it's not always fair. You might be I remember my first ever boyfriend is MOT. This car failed with MOT, and he was really hacked off, and he just didn't want to talk to me, and I got really mardy about that because he wouldn't talk to me, and so we had a row because of that, when actually he was just annoyed with something else. To be fair, I should have recognised that. I hold my hands up to that, but it's, like I say, being aware of your own mindset within that. That was my insecurities. He wouldn't talk to me, and I couldn't see it was nothing to do with me why he wouldn't talk to me. I was like, oh my God, he doesn't want to be with me anymore. He doesn't want to talk to me. He must not love me anymore. All my insecurities going, blah. When actually it was nothing to do with that, but it created the argument because we were both talking from very different places. Cool down first. Count to 10. Take a deep breath. You're not going to resolve anything if you're both really angry. You don't get much done in anger. So give yourself time to process that. Give yourself time to process the emotions and the anger. And then you're in a better place to be able to have a conversation. Own your part in it. Like I just explained that story, I absolutely own the fact that I allowed my insecurities to completely get the better of me and started an argument on that basis. You it's okay to say, I'm sorry, that wasn't about you, that was about me, and I was being a bit of a dick, and I'm sorry. Equally, it might be that you weren't, but you could have handled it better. Again, I know me and my recent ex had an argument because it was about money, and I just brought it up at completely the wrong time. And he wasn't ready to have the conversation, but I was pushing for my own insecurity, and I didn't read the signs particularly well, and yeah, we had an argument. Again, the argument itself isn't the problem. It was resolved, and having that argument, it wasn't a problem, but I'm able to recognize that, again, I wasn't able to see what was really going on. I made it about me. I think another thing is, if you struggled with conflict as a child, you need to work on that and find a way to get comfortable with managing it. And it could be down to a lack of assertiveness in yourself, because some people shy away from conflict and shy away from speaking up for themselves, because they want to avoid the conflict because they don't know how to handle it. They don't know what to do if someone disagrees with them, because they automatically, like I did, think, oh my God, this must be the end of our relationship. So dealing with those insecurities is really going to be very helpful moving forward. Not saying you're not going to have an argument again, but recognizing the role that you play is important. Listen to the other person, listen to what they're saying, pick up on the cues that they are saying. It might not be the right time to have that conversation. Lesson learned. So yeah, really, really listen to not just the words, but the tone, the subtext, and yeah, pick your moment as well with that. Use I. So don't criticize them necessarily. You can say, I feel hurt by what you've just said, rather than, you're a horrible so-and-so, you did this, you did that. Own your own feelings and say, I'm disappointed in what you've just said, I feel, and really own your own feelings, because it's your interpretation of what they've said, and that's really important. But you can voice that. It's not using I words isn't about saying it's all my fault. It's about owning what you're feeling, rather than having a go at that. Oh, look, my cat in the back. Because when you get into that dangerous territory of you're this, you're that, arguments can spiral quite quickly and become very nasty. Finally, seek outside support if necessary. If you are struggling with managing conflict for you, if you don't like conflict, if your insecurities come out during conflict, manage them and learn about yourself. The more we know about ourselves, the better we manage any situation like this. So the final thing is to manage conflict with your child. If you have a child who has a narcissistic parent, there'll be one or two things. They might be absolutely passive and not stand up for themselves at all and just go along with everything, which is the complete opposite end. Or you might have one who's quite aggressive and aggressive, and basically treats you like you're lower than them. So looks down on you, speaks down to you, believes they're superior to you, quite narcissistic in their behaviour. And both can be quite difficult when conflict arises, because on the one hand, the passive child will just roll over, and that's not what you want either. And the aggressive one will dig their heels in and not move and blame you for everything and go running back to the narcissist, telling them what an awful person you are. So managing conflict with kids of narcissists is hard, because again, a part of this is your own insecurities coming into play, but also conflict is a part of their lives. They see it and they've learned different ways. They've learned from you and they've learned from their narcissist parent how to manage conflict, and that's what will come out. So it will be triggering for you because you might see parts of them that you don't like, and equally you might want your child to stand up for themselves, and it might be quite frustrating when they don't. So there's 4 steps that you can help, which is, first one, teach your child to identify and respect their own personal rights as well as the rights of others. So that's really important. The way we're talking about the passive child, they need to know that they have rights. They have, if they want something, they're entitled to ask for it. If they feel unhappy with something, they're entitled to ask for it. But equally, if they're the aggressive child, then they need to understand that other people have rights, and they can't always have their own way because it impacts other people. So it's having those discussions and helping them to see that, which will in turn help them develop empathy, which is another great skill as well. Teach your child the difference between passive aggressive and assertive behaviour. So yeah, you want them in that assertive place where they can ask for what they want without being controlling, and they can give without sacrificing. Practice and teach your child to communicate in a positive way, showing love, dignity, respect and trust. Narcissists don't communicate with any of those things, and so potentially children won't either. But it is important that you have these kind of things as themes around your house, that we only ever speak to each other in a kind way. Even when we're really angry, we won't use nasty words, and if we do, then we apologise for using them. So kind of, again, looking at the sort of things that you want in your house, what you will accept and what you will tolerate. The final one is practice and teach your child the tools to handle conflict within the family, which will, of course, then help them to handle conflict outside of the family. So family rules, like we've talked about, logical consequences. So when they do something, help them to decide what is a suitable consequence of that action, because actually children do have a good moral compass. It can get distorted, but when you have those conversations, then it gives them the chance to own and take responsibility for their actions, but also it allows them to think about the consequences of their action, which will massively help with not just managing conflict, but life in general. So there we go. That was the video. That was the live that you're going to get, which obviously was brilliant. And you would have all been great. There've been superb questions. So now it's over to you. Ask those questions and I will respond. Take care. Bye-bye.